On today's Hot Sheet, I'm discussing Jerome Powell's testimony before the House Financial Service Committee from yesterday, house flipping profits, and mortgage application data for the last 7. Today is Wednesday, June 25, 2025. I am Byron Lazine, and the Hot Sheet starts now. Live from Connecticut, hot in the Northeast. I think New York City hit over 100 yesterday, Haley. What did it feel like to you outside?
Well, my car said on the way home that it was 102 outside.
Yeah, it's been hot in the Northeast. I love it when it's hot. I love it hot up here because you really find out who is just a life complainer, just no matter what happens, and who is reasonable. You find out who the reasonable people are. In the Northeast, sometimes far and few between. I'm a Northeaster, I can say that. Okay, so don't go crazy here if you're from the Northeast in the live comments. But all winter long, people from the Northeast, man, this winter it sucks. And then you get one heat wave, and what do? They complain about that. They're just going to complain about everything. Stay away from those if that's what they're doing. All right, let me know where you're tuning in from. Is it hot where you are? Florida feels. Listen, Nina says, "I love the heat. Feels like Florida." Nina, where's Nina? It does feel like Florida. In fact, I looked up.
New Jersey.
New York City was over 100. Naples was only 90 yesterday. I'm like, boy, bring me back to Naples. Okay, I won't be there much this summer. New Jersey for Nina. All right. Let me know where you're tuning in from. We got Jerome Powell in front of the Congress committee there yesterday. So Jerome Powell he does this maybe once a quarter, testimony, semi-annual. This was the testimony for a semi-annual monetary report to Congress. And we got some Q&A from that. Is he wavering on his position from last week? Last week was more of a indication that July there won't be a cut. Then we saw some, immediately after that, interesting. We saw that Waller from the committee said we should cut in July. So even though you had a unanimous decision on no cut, it almost seemed like within 24 hours you had some dissension from the committee in public comments, maybe positioning themselves to Trump to be the next chairman. I don't know. But what's changed in the last week from Jerome Powell's? He's the chairman. He's the leader of the committee. Any changes there? We're going to go through some of the Q&A as it relates to the rate cuts and as it relates to housing. We've got home flipping profits for investors, and then the big one, mortgage application data for the last 7 days. Hit a like, subscribe to the channel now. Bam. Free, simple way to support all the content that we do. It's the only 24-hour look back on housing for real estate professionals. Every day the markets are open Monday through Thursday. So Jerome Powell, in his testimony, CNN Business came out with the headline yesterday. Haley, button's not working again. If we can get that. CNN Business says Jerome Powell is throwing cold water on a rate cut in July. So right off the bat, we're not getting what we thought we might get immediately after last week's, commentary after the rate decision. It seemed like, maybe we're leaning closer towards a rate cut all of a sudden. But Jerome Powell said this: policy changes continue to evolve and their effects on the economy remain uncertain. So really leaning into uncertainty, favorite phrase from Jerome Powell right now. This was during the prepared statements. We're going to get to the Q&A. For the time being, Jerome says, we are well positioned to wait to learn more about the likely course of the economy before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. So there have been some Fed officials, mentioned Waller, they've joined Trump now. They voted unanimous just last week to keep the rate, the federal funds target rate, where it was, about an average of 4.35. And you had some immediately after saying, hey, we should cut in July. This is something President Donald Trump has been pushing for. This is something that obviously Pulte, the FHFA, head of the FHFA, has been pushing towards. Fed leader, though, Jerome Powell continues to say the tariffs are going to have a future impact on the economy. 2 months in, no impact. In fact, inflation goes down. The projection from Jerome Powell is there will be an impact. We're going to wait to see how deep that impact is and watching closely on what that fallout is going to be. All right. We've got some question and answers. I love when Jerome Powell's got to sit in front of Congress. I love it. This is the House Financial Services Committee. This was yesterday. Day 2 is going to be today. So one's, Congress, and the second one's the Senate. I believe this is going to be the Congress committee. Congress side was yesterday, and I think the Senate side will be today. But I love it because it's like one of the few hearings that you see both sides of the aisle just take shots at the individual that they're talking to. In this case, Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Like both sides beat him up. So kind of love it. A little bit of entertaining there. You got Rashida Tlaib from Michigan kicking it off. Let's go to her questions on eviction rates and higher interest rates if they're worsening the housing crisis. Let's go to her question and Powell's answer.
So we know the housing crisis, I believe, is structural, and some may say it's a policy choice. While there are many factors at play, and you know this, Chairman, high mortgage rates, the finance rates, and so forth, that drag the supply of new housing. But last month, new housing hit a 5-year low. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure exactly what statistic you are referring to.
Okay,
Well, 'cause she didn't
I don't
say
know.
one.
There was all this articles about the housing market and the impact of tariffs and so forth, and they said again it hit a 5-year low. And again, I'm getting this from a source.
Pause this.
This sets the
Tariffs have nothing to do with. I mean, a 5-year low. I think she might be talking about transactions. This is one of the problems. Also, I love that Congress will kind of beat Powell up, but it's one of the problems with having, I think this is, I think I said Congress before, but I think this is the House side. One of the problems with having members of Congress, House, or Senate ask questions to Jerome Powell as it relates to housing is some of them may live in houses, but none of them know the housing market. Okay, they're just navigating through this question is hard to listen to. Let's continue.
The market up for higher inflation and more burdensome housing costs to years to come. So Chairman Powell, I'm looking at this monetary whatever policy framework that you guys have put together. Do you think that the way it's structured, and again, I'm trying to understand how you're looking at this in the housing crisis, do you believe it's eroding new rental supply under construction right now, leading to high inflation in future years?
So I think there are two things going on quickly. One is just there's a longer run shortage of housing in the United States, which there's nothing that the Fed can do about. That's not something we can affect.
He's right. Fed can't do anything about that.
In the short run, rates are high, and that's going to weigh on housing activity. But the best thing we can do for the housing market, the absolute best thing, is to restore price stability so that rates come down and so that rates can be at a level that people can afford. But don't you think that
the restrictive monetary policy the framework you all put together undermines long-term price stability right now by reducing the supply?
No, I mean, I think it restores price stability. The point of higher rates is to...
So you don't think the higher rates is impacting future supply of housing?
She's right about that.
I think what that does is, I think interest-sensitive sectors like housing are very much directly affected when we cut rates or when we raise rates. That's right. But that's part of the mechanism for restoring general price stability.
So keeping the high interest rates does not impact future supply of housing?
Does not, over the long,
I need to go back to talk to
over the long
women
run,
that the study
Fed will not be, our policy will not be a driver of longer run housing supply. In the United
okay,
States.
Let me ask you, what is the difference? And I'm honestly confused.
Hey, she has a point here. Builders build less high interest rate environments, and existing homeowners put their homes on the market less when Jerome Powell and the boys and girls of the FOMC shoved all that liquidity into the market, creating those low rates. When you've got a low rate, trading into a higher rate is a really hard trade-off. And Jerome Powell created this. Okay. Remember the $2.3 trillion he shoved down Congress's throat during the beginning of the Biden administration? Like, we have high inflation. We have a lock-in effect with homeowners because of the obsessive liquidity that was pumped into the market at Jerome Powell's urging. Love the points here on how interest rates are actually supporting what Jerome Powell says is a longer run shortage of housing. Really, the shortage of housing is an affordable housing level, but he's sticking. Powell's answer on housing is always, we have a long run shortage of housing. I can't do anything about it. Remember, the Fed doesn't care about the housing market, home ownership market. They care about price stability. And he talks about, we need to fix price stability, mean keep rates high so that prices come down and then lower rates. That's his plan. He kind of made that clear last week. We want price to be suppressed by restrictive policy, higher rates. They haven't, I think the Fed expected prices to come down a lot sooner, and they just haven't. 40% of homeowners, Jerome, don't have a mortgage. And then the rates come down once prices come down, but you haven't seen prices come down all that much outside of a few years. Let's finish up with the representative from Michigan, and then we'll move on.
Want to learn here, and I'm sure people listening to this want to learn. What is the difference between demand-driven rent inflation and supply-driven rent inflation? Like, you guys use these terminology. What is that? How do I communicate
Rent prices
that
have come
to the
down for
public?
24
What is the
months.
difference between supply-driven versus demand-driven rent?
You know, those are not terms that we use particularly often.
What's
but
supply-driven formula?
that would mean that, you know, that there's not enough supply to meet demand, but at the same time, it also means there's more demand than there is supply.
So are you guys ignoring that?
They don't
No,
control it.
But as I said again, our policies will not affect in the long run.
No, I'm being
either
serious,
demand
'cause I
or
see somebody
supply
behind
in
you kind of
housing.
check. I'm being
They're
serious,
shaking their
y'all.
head because your
We're
question is
talking about a
irrelevant to what the
housing
Fed
crisis
does.
that is getting worse
All right, I'm done listening to this
right
one.
now because we're
So,
not paying attention.
She made a good point, then she backed it up with just, she doesn't understand what the Fed does, yet Congress gives the mandate to the Fed. Okay. Right now, you and all your cronies on the left and the right have given a mandate to the Fed. The mandate is inflation at 2% and maximize employment. The mandate is not maximize housing supply. Jerome Powell and the Fed have clearly stated, we don't care about home ownership rates. Not a concern. Now, I think that's kind of insane for our government to be structured in a way where we'd rather have people renting than owning a home, because we know the long-term wealth, how it's built up. She really hit on something that was interesting. Hey, your policy, higher rates, is restricting supply. Yes, but then at the same time, she's digging further and further on supply when he doesn't control supply. The laws created in Congress could have a bigger impact on supply than anything the Fed can do. She almost had it where it's like, hey, if you lower rates, with that fluidity to the market, create an environment where prices get stable and there's more affordability, but then she kind of lost it. All right, let's go to the Wisconsin representative, Brian Steele. And let's dig into this one.
Can you provide color as to how you're analyzing the impact that housing and shelter costs have on families and on inflation with your desire to maintain price stability, the interest rates that is currently set by the Fed?
Sure. So, we realize that people are feeling high housing costs and high financing costs. In terms of inflation, we look at something called owner's equivalent rent and rentals, and that's meant to capture both rented housing and owned housing. And it's been very sticky.
Because it's a
been
dumb
one of the
analysis.
stickiest parts of inflation. I'm happy to say now it actually is coming down quite regularly. That's very good news. That's been the part, really, it's been the service inflation that's been stickier than other parts of inflation. So that's good news for people, I think, and it is showing through into measured inflation now. Again, in the long run, the best thing we can do is restore price stability and let the market work. Even then, though, we're still going to have a housing shortage.
So Powell said what I think is this is where inflation gets it wrong. He just said we look at something called owner's equivalent rent and rentals. This is if this is your first hot sheet, let us know in the comments. But everyone that's been on the hot sheet for a while now knows I say this whole time. And it's not me saying, Wall Street Journal's reported this. Owner's equivalent rent's a 1980 survey. A lot of the data comes from just regular people, not professionals, and it's 2-year-old data. And it's basically asking homeowner, hey, what would your current home rent for? If you had to go rent a current home, what would it rent for? And it's been very sticky because you're not using real-time data. You're talking to people who aren't professionals. You're not using the data that's available to you in real time. It is finally coming down. Powell said it would take 1 or 2 years for this data to catch up. It is finally starting to catch up, but we're kind of at the beginning. And this is one of the reasons why inflation is above the 2% target. It's the way we analyze the numbers. Okay. Look, you can go into any town in America and all of a sudden you go on IG and there's like 3, 4, 5 different teams or agents saying they're number one in the market. Well, what are you, number one at listings, number one at volume, number one at units, number one at sales over the last 24 months, number one since interest rates went up, number one in the hearts of your husbands and wives. Like, what are you number one at? And so you could move the numbers any way you want. This is one of the ways that we move numbers in inflation that I don't agree with. Wall Street Journal did a really good write-up on it. It's ridiculous. It's outdated. It's old. It's clunky, but it's still what they're looking at mostly as it relates to shelter and inflation. Powell admitted it there. He's been asked in the past, should they relook at this? And they're slow to change anything, right? Government, if they've been doing it for decades, they're slow to unwind to what actually works today. Just look now, like just this past week there was a bill passed on finally making US crypto backed by the US dollar 1-to-1, those USD coins, something that's recognized. Like everybody's known for years, you back something by the dollar 1-to-1, like there's no problem with it, but they're slow to move. All right, let's go to the follow-up here and then we'll move on.
What data do you think is leading to the reduction in the rent equivalent?
I just think it took time. So the thought is when you would think that if rents come up every year, you would think it would take 1 year or 2 years for a lack of growth in rents to show up in a lack of growth in housing prices. It turns out it takes 4 years or 3 years. If you're an existing tenant, it's a complicated thought, but if you're an existing tenant, you don't actually catch up the way you would if new tenants came in.
That's right.
And so that's made the measurement of inflation stickier. But I'm happy to say we've been through that period now, and we are really seeing now housing services inflation pretty close to where it was when inflation was solidly at 2%.
Yeah,
and
if you actually use real-time data, inflation might be lower than 2%. What he's talking about with existing tenants versus new tenants, as we've seen the last 24 months, rental prices have come down. We're well off of we're off of the 2022 peak rather on rent prices. So if you're a new tenant today, you've got more leverage. Certainly Austin, Texas, Tampa, Florida, some of these locations where they built a lot of there's a lot of competition. You can go into one of these, multifamily complexes and negotiate incentives and terms because that's the position that they're in, supply demand, right? If you're an existing tenant, you don't want to move. You don't want to go through the hassle of moving. Well, you might have in your current lease kind of set up like what you roll over and lock into, and it might be an increase. And so that's the difference there that we're talking about between, existing tenants versus new tenant. New tenants seem to get the benefit here. Marlon Stutzman from Indiana actually cited a Grant Cardone critique and brought this up to Jerome Powell. What universe are we living in? A member of Congress bringing up Grant Cardone to Jerome Powell. Love to hear it. Let's see the reaction from Powell.
Up on a lot by folks all around the country, but I want to speak specifically to one particular individual, Cardone Capital, Grant Cardone. He made some pretty strong remarks about the.
He's writing the name down. Should I
your
look this up?
policy when it comes to the housing industry, and he said, that's why you have 500,000 more homes listed than buyers for those homes. When the rates come down, prices will also come down with it because you'll have more supply in the marketplace, and supply is what controls prices. He went on to say that, interest rates do not control prices. And he explained that lower rates could stimulate activity in the market, and activity is what makes the economy work. And I agree with his comments, overall, but I believe, as you said earlier, the economy seems stable. And I would agree with that coming from an ag and manufacturing area. It's not booming yet, but I believe most people are optimistic that the good times are coming and that the structure is set and in place. But when it comes to housing, it seems like that's where a lot of Americans are. They're stuck. They've had low rates. They've got a good mortgage rate, but if they want to make a move, they have to go out of that 3% interest rate into 4.5%, 5% or higher percent interest rate. Thoughts on addressing housing, because their prices are up for sure, but people aren't. There's no activity. There's the velocity is very slow. Would you like to comment on any of that?
Sure.
A lot there.
We see the same thing you do in the housing market. It's tough. There's not people are locked in. They can't afford to get out of their house because the cost of getting to a higher mortgage, higher price mortgage would be a lot. So the best thing we can do, though, is to get inflation sustainably down to 2% and have it stay there over a long period of time. And that is really what we can offer to them. And I think so. If you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, when we cut to zero and we did all those programs, we really saved the housing industry because they're the front line for interest rates. At a time like this, when rates are, I would say modestly restrictive, not even moderately, but modestly restrictive, they feel it, and their customers feel it. We understand that, but we only have one tool for the whole economy, not just for housing. So it's something we consider, but we have to consider the bigger picture. And I do think in the medium term, as rates come down, you'll see normalization in housing. Of course, there'll still be a national housing shortage. I don't know about your district, but
yeah, no, there's a shortage.
Yeah.
I wish Stutzman from Indiana, and we'll go to his follow up here in a second, didn't ask such a long question. It was interesting. I don't know how Grant Cardone got him to mention his name. I got to him. One thing you can say about Grant Cardone is he's a master at marketing. For the representative there from Indiana to say Cardone Capital, okay, that's kind of planted in there. He's obviously put out these critiques of the Fed policy online, but his theory, Grant Cardone's theory on, I tend to agree with this. Now, I tend to agree with it maybe halfway. So that, meaning if rates come down, and let's call it high fives, whatever, okay, rates come down. Right now, you've got, sellers that are still locked up, that this would bring a lot of sellers to the market. It's those sellers that got to buy on the other end. Okay, if I'm trading from 3.5 up to 5.5, I can start to make sense of that. I need a bigger house. I need a house in a different location. I need a house in a different school district. All the people that are like, I do have a reason to move, but I'm not moving because I'm not giving up 3.5 for 7. Okay. So you bring all these sellers into the market. creating even more supply, which then brings prices down. I agree with that theory, but I think it's short-lived. I think those prices come down in a season, maybe a quarter, maybe 2 to 6 months. And then as all the buyers enter the market at 5.5, it pushes them back up and starts moving prices up, because ultimately we have an affordable housing crisis, right? We have an affordable housing shortage. And as those buyers re-enter the market, those prices are coming down, they start to have more options. And then that creates over time the reverse effect where home prices go down. And Greg Cardone, I think, knows this. Like, home price, his real estate assets, are going to appreciate. He's in the appreciation game, just like he's in the cash flow game. I get it. But it's ultimately the big wins come on real estate appreciation. So in the short term, I think he's right. Prices come down. So I wish he just stopped there. Hey, in the short term, prices come down. You get both. You get more supply and you get prices to come down. What are your thoughts on that, Powell? But he kind of elongated the question. Powell didn't ultimately answer that. Let's go to his follow-up and then we'll move on.
Considering the macroeconomics of interest rates, I mean, how much consideration do you take housing into that decision as you address interest rates?
We're always briefed on it. We always talk about it. We always look at it. But at the end of the day, it's the big U.S. economy.
At the end of the day, they
whole
don't care
aggregate
about
thing that
housing.
matters. We also talk about the agricultural economy a lot as well, but ultimately, and manufacturing, it's got to be the whole, and not any one particular piece.
Congress sets the rules for the Fed. So Congress complains to Jerome Powell about housing because when you're a Congress person, you hear from people in your local constituents. They want the American dream. We know this. Okay. Real estate professionals across America know this. People in your community want the American dream. They want a good job. Okay. In the Northeast, they want to complain about the weather, whether it's super cold or super hot. They just like to complain, and they want a good house. They want a good place to live and all of that. They want prices to be sustainable. Okay. The thing is, Congress likes to complain about housing because it gets them points with their voter base, but the Fed doesn't control housing. And so Powell it's the big U.S. economy. Congress, why don't you do something about housing supply? You could create even less regulation, lean into your local. You guys are all local people coming together to make up Congress, but yet the local municipalities, towns, counties are backwards when it comes to housing regulations. Let's go to Monica De La Cruz from Texas. The last question as it relates to housing, and this one on mortgage rates specifically. And I think this is pretty good question because it's one that the Fed actually can have influence on. So let's go to De La Cruz.
So, Chair Powell, mortgage rates remain significantly elevated relative to Treasury yields, with spreads well above historical norms. To what extent does the Federal Reserve believe its balance sheet policy, particularly the runoff of MBS holdings, is contributing to this widening? And how does that factor into your broader assessment of financial conditions?
I don't think that our runoff of MBS is a particularly large contributor to that situation. I also think it's not just interest rates. It's so many things around housing now. It's insurance, it's materials, it's land acquisition, it's labor. There's so many cost pressures that are pushing up housing costs.
But one of them is more.
With that
Let's see what her follow-up was there.
being said, moving on to an entirely different
All right,
topic.
never mind.
If the federal
she made a good point. I would have followed up on it, but mortgage-backed securities were running off the mortgage-backed securities on the balance sheet. If the Fed was buying mortgage-backed securities, those rates would come down, obviously. Yes, of course, insurance and other things also factor into it, but that is the one tool that the Fed does have. I'm not saying that they should have, done that, but there you go. There's your update on Jerome Powell, day one. We'll see if there's anything new yesterday or today as he goes into day two. Ultimately, though, did kind of throw, and those were the housing related questions, but ultimately threw a little bit of cold water on, some of the momentum we saw last week after the meeting in terms of, a rate cut in July, a lot more wait and see, a lot more what we've heard. CME Group, though, has it down to under 80% chance that the rates stay the same and up over 20% that in July the rates do get cut. So interesting there. Adam drops first quarter data on home flipping. Home flippers, the real ones, they've been on the sidelines for years. You see a lot of the wannabe real estate investors when the market got real high, kind of in there, pushing those prices up. I haven't flipped a home in 3 years. It's just gotten too crazy, particularly in Connecticut, where it's just like, I'm just not, there's no margin. I'm not tying up cash for 6 months. I don't do lipstick on a pig flip. Like I want to actually rehabilitate the home. But now you're starting to see flippers and investors come back into the market, more opportunities as inventory goes up, creating, potential for higher levels of negotiation. The U.S. home flipping report here from Adam on Q1 shows that 67,000 plus single family homes and condos were flipped in Q1 of 2025. That was 8.3% of all home sales January through March. So 8.3% of homes sold January through March were flipped. That rise of 8.3% was from 7.4% in quarter four, but it was slightly down from quarter one in quarter one in 24, where it was 8.7% of flips. So actually moving down. Haley, what are you giggling about there?
Jeff's comment.
What we posted? I can't see it. What do you have? Oh boy. All right, here we go. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Summer cut, that's what we're at. All right. Let's take a look here at some more of the data here from the house flipping. Going to your BAMX members, very simple. If you're working with investors, you want to get some of the house flipping information into your market, just jump into the classroom. For the hot sheet, we drop all the data that we're using each and every single day right in here. You can download it right on your phone through the app on School for BAMX members. Single family homes and condos flipped. That number has been moving down over the last 3 years. This is kind of the escape out of the market for investors as home prices have hit record highs. And interestingly though, the home flip rate of percent of total sales is higher than what it's been, leading into the 2020s. Interesting. Okay. With kind of this decline in total sales, home flipping rate is up at a higher level than we've seen in the last 15 years, not to the peak of 21, 22, down from quarter one of last year, but still a higher percent, 8.3%. So investors seeing these high prices continuing to, make those moves into the market, albeit, at a lower percent than we saw in quarter one. So interesting, higher percent home flipping rate. And there you go on that one. Home flipping profits. Here we go. Look at this. This is the reason I'm not flipping right now. Gross return on investment has been on a sharp decline, really over the last almost 10 years. When you were flipping in 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you could get something really cheap, make it really nice, work with a first-time home buyer, and get a good return on investment. Okay. Gross return on investment at the lowest level we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years, lowest level since 06, 07. Gross profit up at some of the higher levels that we've seen, just about 50% gross profit. Return on investment down closer to 25% right now. This is according to the Adam research. Average days to flip, 164 right now. That hasn't changed much over the years. Average days to flip 164, and that, like, to me, that makes me feel good about where we're at on some of these flips. When somebody says they turn something over in 30 days, I'm like, boy, I feel bad for that buyer. Okay, but a real rehabilitation takes a little bit longer. Right now, the average days is 164 on house flipping. And if that's factoring in time on market and all of that, that could be a little bit low depending on kind of what those investors are doing. Total share of sales quarter over quarter, 76.3%, 132 of the 173 metropolitan statistical areas. The share is down compared to the same time last year, 2/3. Here's some of the metropolitan areas. Warner Robins in Georgia had 20.6%. So this is some of the biggest share of flips. Atlanta, Georgia, 15.9. Tennessee, 14.7. Akron, Ohio, 13.3%. These house flipping returns are down annually in more than half of metros. So profits and returns not going up, but moving down. All right, let's take a look at where we're at on mortgage applications. It's a big deal every single week. What's the future of the housing market going to look like? Mortgage applications increased 1.1% from 1 week earlier. Interesting. At a seasonal time when it seems like one of the common objections real estate agents are getting is, I'm going to wait through the summer. Summer brings a slower market. You actually see week over week an application increase. There's still a lot of sideline demand. This tells me future still looks bright. If rates were to come down even more, you'll see more enter the market. Applications overall on the headline increase. There's a adjustment with last week's holiday as well. Refinance increased 3%, 29% higher than the same week a year ago. Seasonally adjusted purchase index, though, decreased 0.4% from 1 week earlier. So flat on the purchase, but the big number, 12% higher than the same week 1 year ago. That's now 21 straight weeks of year over year increase on the purchase application. That is a very optimistic signal about the future if rates come down closer to 6%. The quote here included ongoing conflict on the Middle East as a concern for the VP at Mortgage Banker Association. Markets certainly disagree with Joel Kahn. Markets have not, the 10-year has actually moved down, and the stock market has not negatively reacted to the ongoing conflict. Last week's FOMC meeting, I would say, have a bigger impact on treasury rates and current economic conditions. And so rates still, they've been stable. They've been just under 7%. And you see stability here with the mortgage application data still at a low level, going back to 95, touchdown in the recovery to the great financial crisis at these levels. Overall, long way to go on purchase application data, which means the future of your business as a real estate professional is only going up from here. It's been a real estate recession for 3 years now, starting to see signals that on the long run, things will get better. 10-year today coming in at 4.322. 4.322 is kind of a low spot for the last month, and keeping rates stable in that lower, 6 7/8, almost edging towards 6 3/4 range. Yesterday, we came in at 6.82 on the 30-year fixed daily survey, according to Mortgage News Daily. So, 5-6 consistent moves down on the 30-year fixed. 6.82. We'll see what happens here today. Later today, 2 o'clock, Haley, right? 2 o'clock. Haley, are you hosting the webinar?
I sure am.
I'm hosting the webinar. You're producing the webinar. That was a trick question. I'm hosting along with Luke Acree from Reminder Media. And listen, this is an open house, free webinar. If you want to elevate your open house experience right now, this is a webinar you need to register for. Totally free. I'll be on with Luke. Who is Luke's brother coming on?
Yes.
So Luke's brother runs one of the largest Middle Atlantic real estate teams. And he has a killer open house strategy. Luke's a brilliant marketing mind. Luke's got, I don't know, 250, 300 employees in his company. The guy knows marketing, knows how to position marketing. He's helped his brother elevate one of the biggest brands in Middle Atlantic region. And this open house strategy is absolutely killer. It's Luke and Stephen Cree joining me on 2 o'clock Eastern. And I'll try to add some value. These two guys are killers. So looking forward to that webinar, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. Absolutely free, open to anybody, whether you're a BAMX member or not. Join this open house webinar. 18 closings from open house leads just last year. I think agents understand there's traffic at open houses. Taking traffic to leads to closings, another story. Join me 2 o'clock Eastern with Luke and Steven. Link down below. I'll see you guys then. Until then, of course, have a great day and toodaloo.